What's up guys, and welcome back to Tech Plan. Today we're going to talk about how to care for aloe vera. It's actually quite simple, so let's check it out. Alright, I've been meaning to make this video for quite some time. That one in the center was the mother plant in a video I made about 2 years ago about how to split the pups away and grow them yourself, and you can see it's been quite successful. So I want to share some tips on how to actually care for aloe vera plants based on your setup. So let's get started. Surprisingly, aloe vera actually extremely simple to care for. We're going to start out with lighting for this guide, and it's actually a super simple one. A lot of people think they require tons of light because they're a succulent and they're kind of cactus-like, but in all reality, they don't need much light at all to thrive. For instance, I've had one next to my washing machine in the basement, and it gets like indirect light from a basement window, and it really gets almost nothing at all, and it's still doing just fine, and it's been there for months. I kind of feel bad for it, a little lazy, but it was an experiment. At least that's how I justify my laziness. But just to kind of show you, all of my plants look pretty good and green and healthy, and they're not getting very much light. They're actually not under grow lights in my grow room, they're off to the side. And to really prove that point, after filming this, I wanted to show you what a light stressed aloe vera plant looks like. So I took one and put it under one of my grow lights that I keep my cactuses and other succulents under for only 3 to 4 days, and you can see the color change is drastic. These things do something called light stressing, which a lot of succulents do, and that's when they start to change color to protect themselves from the sun. So I just wanted to prove to you guys that they really don't need a ton of light to thrive, and they start stressing out when they get any substantial amount. Next up is watering. There's going to be kind of a few portions to this topic, but I'll start with like how to tell when to water these. Honestly, I water them very rarely and very sparingly. I've talked about this in the past, but this is one of those plants that the more neglect and abuse you give it, the more it thrives. If you start watering it too much, depending on your location and light, they're going to fail and they're going to start to root rot. My go-to method to figure out if they want some water is to look at the leaf blades. If they start to get a really deep U, it means they're starting to get dehydrated. So they store a lot of water in the leaves, and so the more plump and firm and thick they are, the less water they're going to be needing because they already have a bunch stored. So here's an example where I'm just holding like a little piece of metal across, and you can see on the different leaves how some don't have a very deep U and some do. So the ones with the leaves without deep U's really don't need much water, and then the ones with the very deep U's are plants that I've definitely neglected a little more than normal, and they could use some water. But for me, that's the best way to really tell. If they're nice and plump, they don't need any water. It's not going to help them, they're not going to be able to store it, and it's just going to sit in the soil. A quick tip for those of you who discover you have a dehydrated one: don't panic and just douse it with tons of water. It's not going to suck it up and immediately rehydrate perfectly. It's something that's going to happen over a little bit of time. So definitely do more frequent waterings, but don't do a ton of it, because if you do way too much and panic, you're going to kill it anyways. They don't just instant plump. Taking a look at some of the soil in the pots, you can see it's bone dry. I'm just scraping away and it's just dusty and dry. There is literally zero moisture in there, and there probably hasn't been for at least a week or two, and that's just fine. As long as you're not putting these in the scorching sun, they can go forever without water. Usually watering almost always correlates with how much light they're getting, because that's what's going to cause them to use it up and dry out. When I do decide to water these, I really don't give them a ton. I know some people talk about saturating the entire pot, but I usually almost never do that. That's really only necessary if they're sitting out in the hot sun where they're drying out quick. If you have a large pot and you just saturate it, you're really going to invite in a bunch of root rot if it's not drying out quick enough. So I usually just target the very base of the plant with some water and get it a little bit wet around the base and allow capillary action to spread the water around and just dampen it nicely for the plant to suck up a little bit, but then dry out in a timely manner so it doesn't rot. Next up, and the last kind of tip for helping people care and water for these, is the pot choice. With terracotta pots, you really can't go wrong. It helps it dry out really quickly, and it really doesn't allow a lot of water to sit in there. The terracotta actually breathes really well, and it will wick water out of the soil and into the air. You can see in this video footage that when I spray it with water, it really soaks in and spreads out, and that is exactly what you want. With plastic pots, that does not happen, and the water sits in there and it doesn't breathe nearly as well. Depending on your situation though, maybe a plastic pot would be helpful if you do have them out in the hot sun, because it will hold water a little longer. Another good reason to use a terracotta pot is the weight itself. Aloe vera plants can get very heavy and topple over easily, so if you're using a nice heavy terracotta pot, that's really going to help. Another aspect to the pot, if you're not really sure about your environment very well and you're starting out, a smaller pot will prevent you from overwatering as easy because you just have less volume of like water, if that makes any sense. If you have one giant saturated pot, it's going to take a lot longer to dry than a much smaller pot because the roots are going to be much more dense and they'll suck it up quicker in that smaller pot. Well guys, that pretty much sums up this video. I hope you liked it. I hope it was pretty easy to follow. I know I can ramble a little bit, but I think the tips are pretty clear. Again, as long as it's not in the hot sun or under really strong grow lights, you can pretty much just leave them be and they will do their own thing for a very long time before you have to intervene. As always, may your plants grow strong and healthy. I'll see you next time.